Welcome to another episode of Between Lewis and Lovecraft. Thank you so much for checking us out. The show is all about learning more about the authors that have inspired us and diving into the stories that they not only created, but lived as well. So join us as we explore the worlds that live just out of reach. Guys, today we are going to talk about some of the works of Lovecraft, but first, his sex life. Mostly with his wife, but also, perhaps, a 14-year-old boy. Honestly, Lovecraft is so complicated that we couldn't even do it in 2 episodes. So remember that if you ever want to add to the show and the conversation, you can always go to our Facebook page and talk to us there. This is the second in a 2-part episode series, so make sure you check out episode 1 before you listen to this one. Unless your brain has expanded beyond the point of reconciliation, and you seemingly seek to drive yourself mad. If so, just keep listening. I've got the full list here of all his books.
That'll be so helpful.
Or like his stories. I'm just gonna straight read it later.
List them all.
Every single.
So we can rank them by title coolness.
Yes. Yeah, maybe our listeners will go on and be like, "Oh, this one should have been better." I don't know. I'm excited I got that in the back of this book. So.
Are you also excited to start talking?
Let's start talking about it.
About this. We're gonna get good at intros sometime, people. Just not today.
I like the cold opening feel of like. Almost like people are catching us off guard.
Oh, yeah. We're mid-conversation and they just walked into the book nook.
Exactly. They're just walking into where we record. What a great segue.
Thank you.
We should probably introduce ourselves first, though.
Okay.
I'm Tyler.
And I'm Hannah.
Yeah, and you're listening to Between Lewis and Lovecraft, a podcast where we do stuff. I said it earlier in the episode because I do all the intros.
Okay. So we're just being repetitive right now.
Yeah, jumping into the stories of people's lives that they not only created but lived. I don't know. Something like that. Anyway, we're recording at the Book Nook, surrounded by books. Which
is a great environment. It really gets the readerly juices flowing.
Mm-hmm. And we kind of just spent a few minutes getting more acquainted with a book nook than we normally do when we're recording.
Yeah, that's because we took some promo pictures, y'all.
We did. And you'll see in all of them how sweaty and awkward I am.
And how I can't have a serious face for more than 1/2 of a second.
1/2 of 1 second. My brother, who took the pictures of us together, at one point specifically said to Hannah, "Choose a face."
I can't. I can't, guys.
Just choose a face and stick with it.
I'm two-faced.
It's like my favorite thing I've ever heard someone say, choose a face.
That's the meanest thing anybody has said to me today.
Today. I was going to say today. In your life, because that's a really good life.
I've had a charmed life. No, just today. But yeah, so today we're talking about one of the authors that's in our title. So obviously this is a very important episode. We talked a little bit about the early life last time of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah, we talked about what makes a Lovecraft.
And what makes a Lovecraft is family tragedy and wandering around a dark mansion and
fainting at soccer games so you don't have to play anymore.
Yep, and riding your bike around Providence.
Right, yeah. Today we're going to get into an adult Lovecraft. Basically what comes out of the oven after that's baked for a couple of years. What do you get? Apparently what you get is a lot of racism, slight homosexuality.
Oh, yeah, I was wondering if we were going to talk about that.
Yeah, why not?
I have questions.
Everyone does. That's why it's such an interesting topic.
Yeah.
Because there's no real answers, but we're going to still dig into it.
We're going to make assumptions anyway.
That's what we do.
Yes. We're a little bit of fact and a lot of fiction over here.
Did you see how quickly I jumped on the C.S. Lewis spanks people thing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someday we're going to talk about an author who's like totally pure and doesn't have any like...
That sounds like a boring author. Who would want to talk about that?
I don't know.
Yeah, me either. Not on my show. That's for damn sure.
Not on my show. But
Not if I have anything to say about it.
And he does.
I guess. So we're talking about the latter half of H.P. Lovecraft. Do you want to get us started?
Yeah, so... We've already covered his dad and his grandpa dying. Do we want to dive into his next great tragedy of his life?
His mom. Yeah.
His
I
mom.
mean, we talked about her quite a bit.
We did talk about her background and stuff. We didn't talk about her death or any of that. So, ironically or coincidentally, I'm not sure which one it is. Mm-hmm. In 1918, his mom started showing signs of a nervous breakdown.
Right.
Went to live with her sister, but then eventually got committed to the same mental hospital that his dad was committed to and died in earlier.
Yeah, which I think, I mean, would that be a comfort? Or would that cause more of a breakdown for you?
You have two crazy parents, like...
No, I mean, like, for her. Like,
for her?
Hey, we're going to send you to the same place that your cheating, philandering husband died of syphilis in.
I don't know. I don't know that she was in a good state to consider that.
No? All right.
No, well. she was already pretty far gone.
I'm trying to get comfortable here.
Yeah, he's adjusting the mic right now.
So much. I was leaning forward for the whole intro, and now I'm like, I've got a whole couch to myself because Amy's not here.
That's right. We shouldn't have given her a shout out. She doesn't deserve it. She's not going to be here with us.
She's not going to be here. Why would we talk about her? Yeah. So she dies, and
she died after complications from gallbladder surgery, which isn't that just depressing?
Which, interesting enough, slight spoiler, isn't that close to what Lovecraft died of? He died of like some sort of like intestinal thing, right?
Yeah, he had small intestine cancer.
Right.
So it was a gut issue.
Maybe it's just they're a gutless family.
Ooh. Oh. Grandpa Whipple is turning over in his grave.
Don't get me started on Grandpa Whipple.
No, that's actually a dangerous road to go down.
Yeah, I've already made the T-shirt for that.
He's not lying, guys.
I really did.
He is not lying.
While I was listening for edits, I was just kind of sitting there playing around, and I made a super creepy, cute little Lovecraft.
It's actually really good. She said grudgingly.
It's actually, I didn't have any faith in him. So she dies, and what year was it?
1921.
Okay, and.
So at this point, Lovecraft's like 31 years old. Mm-hmm. He's an orphan. He's sad.
He's an orphan. He's a 31. And next year, I might be an orphan too. So, like I'll know exactly
You'll
what
be
that
Lovecraft.
feels like. Yeah.
Your writing will get so much better.
Do you think that his writing got better after she died?
Well, I don't know. He wasn't really even hitting his stride yet because it was around the early 1920s when he really started writing some of his works that we know today.
The big ones, yeah. I mean, according to my big list at the end of my book here, you said she died in 21?
21.
Yeah, he didn't even publish or write anything in 21. He jumps from 1919. Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking at all of them. He wrote so many books. 21, he wrote The Outsider, which actually is a really good book. The Outsider, did you read that one?
I didn't read that one.
That one's really good. The Nameless City. The Quest of Ironon. I don't know that one at all. And then he also, The Facts Concerning Late Arthur Jermyn and His Family.
Which is like a stupid story.
The Moonbog, The Other Gods, The Music of Eric Zahn, which is a very good story. Those were all
he wrote
written
all of this in 1921 or it was published in 21?
Those are when they say he wrote them. And then they'd say later where they were published.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he was doing some okay writing. Like I think he was really finding his voice at this point. And ironically, there's nothing in any of those stories, at least off the top of my head. There could be some because I don't know all of his stories by heart. That's why I'm so interested in Lovecraft, is because I'm getting to know him as I read more of him, right? Nothing that points to his dealing with the passing of his mom.
No, I don't. Yeah. Thinking back, he doesn't really write about loss a lot, but he does write about people going mad a lot, which we talked about a little bit the last time. Like, is that a way to cope with, the way that your dad left you and stuff like that? Like, you're making it the responsibility of an outside force that has driven someone mad. Mm-hmm. Not like syphilis. But yeah, so he was well into writing some pretty solid stuff. Right. And at least in my reading, I found that he started selling some of his stories to that horror magazine Weird Tales in 1923. and they would end up publishing a lot of his stuff. It was Weird Tales, and then I think there were a couple other ones that bought and published his stuff a bit. There's Astounding Stories is one of them, one of the like publications that would buy some of his stuff.
Yeah. He was writing to smaller magazines, and he was building a fan base, almost more than a fan base, through these magazines, because I mean people would get to know him. They would know his writing and what he was saying and stuff. They could write to him, and the editors call him and all kinds of different stuff. So it wasn't just that he was publishing a story and that was the end of it. Like he's building a group of people who are like fanatics for his writing. And this is where it's really starting is at that time when he gets picked up by Weird Tales.
Yeah, and it seems like a really cool way to kind of interact with your readers that people who write like long form novels don't necessarily get. Because like you said, they're writing back to him and the editor's publishing them and stuff like that. It's almost like writing on, websites or whatever where, commenters can leave comments on your work basically. Feel like they know you as an author.
Right. So he was doing a lot of writing for Weird Tales. You said 1923 is when he got picked up.
Yeah, that was what I found. They bought some of his stories then, and that was his kind of first real taste of success.
And then it was a year later that he got married.
Yeah.
And this is a defining era for Lovecraft. So this is 1924 when he decides to move to New York to marry Sonia Green,
who he met at a journalism conference, I think.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about his journalism. I didn't look into it almost at all.
I couldn't find that many examples of it. I think it was mostly him like writing those science-based articles and stuff for publication. Taking
his childhood slideshows,
yes, and publishing
them. Yeah, so I could see that.
So that led him to his wife.
Yeah.
And she led him to New York City, which he did not like.
Yeah. So let's start with getting into who Sonia Green is a little bit. Do you know much about her?
I don't know a ton about her, other than that she does not seem like an altogether pleasant person.
Really? Because W. Scott Poole is a huge defender of hers.
Oh.
Yeah. So he uses her to kind of start the conversation of Lovecraft's sexuality. Obviously, this is important in a marriage, right? So if he was asexual or homosexual, him marrying a woman and traveling to New York, that's a big deal because that goes against what he wants. But he was infatuated with her, and there was this sort of connection that they had intellectually, and she pushed for him to write a lot of the stuff that he was writing. And I don't have anything just off like, oh, these are quotes from her all that much, but there's I don't know. You said that she didn't seem like altogether a great person. Why do you come at it like that?
I just feel like that, especially because after he died, she was a little bit mean in her in what she told a Lovecraft scholar, and I was like, that's not very nice to talk about your ex-husband of like 2 years that way.
What did she say?
Did you see? So she was talking about his lack of proficiency in the bedroom.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so the part that I saw was she said that he was adequate sexually, but his temperament didn't allow for too much intercourse. Right? So
that seems like a major slight.
I guess
you're adequate in bed, HP.
If the person you're talking about, you're concerned that they're gay, and she's like, I mean, he's not. He performed. He did his job, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't struggle with that, so I don't know what that's like for someone who might not be attracted, but they're bound by societal expectations to get it up, like.
Well, at least he tried, because Sonia told the scholar dude that HP was a virgin when they got married.
Right, which isn't surprising at all, honestly.
Well, he was like 30 something.
But it's Lovecraft we're talking about. He didn't go outside. Like, he literally was awake at midnight and walked around just, Grandpa Whipple, where are you? Like, he
not
just
meeting a lot of
did
girls.
nothing. But right, yeah, exactly.
But apparently he bought a lot of books and studied before their wedding night so that he could try to perform.
Well, and that's the only, I mean, if you think about who Lovecraft is, he's read a lot of anatomy books already. He already had an understanding of women, but he didn't, like, also, like, the Arabian Nights has a lot of sex stuff in it. So, like, he has an idea of it, and he probably was like, Sonia, I got this.
He's like, it can't be that hard.
I've read 1001 Arabian Nights. And she's like, God, no, that's not how it works. You need more education. But there was, like, they did seem very much in love, especially when they're corresponding through letters, and when they would, when she came to visit him, and they were pretty inseparable when they first started to kind of find this courtship. And after they got married, like, she would make sure that he ate. She'd make sure that he'd wear nice clothes. She'd take care of him. They were, I'm going to get the name wrong, but they took they gave nicknames for each other, Socrates and Xanthippe. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. Xanthippe.
Yeah, that's not really going to help.
Yeah, Xanthippe.
So they have obscure literary... I mean, Socrates isn't obscure.
It's not that obscure.
The other one is.
I'm sure they get it, and they chuckle about it. Beck and I have nicknames for each other, but like dumbass and doofus. No, I'm just joking.
Do you need to talk to somebody, Tyler?
So, Hannah, no, I'm joking. She and I, we do have nicknames for each other. It's something that couples do, and it seems like they have a legitimate relationship. But
more of like a best friends relationship.
Almost.
Not a passionate lovers relationship.
Yeah, like super best friends, though. Like, yeah, like on the edge of being lovers sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like that. Like, if you're watching a sitcom about the two and they're not together, they're really the two that you're like, when are you going to just fucking get together? God! Like, they're those people because they're so affectionate towards each other and they support each other, especially Sonia supporting him. He didn't do any work. He didn't go to New York and start a job. He just showed up and he was just right.
He was a kept man. Yeah.
She provided the money. Her family was rich and they provided the money for him. So, I don't know. I think that because of how things ended between them, there's a lot of room for her to be kind of jilted towards him, especially, after he's dead. And I think the fact that she never really came out, as far as anything that I've seen, she never came out and was like, yeah, he liked dudes and he was weird, and like she did basically a striptease for him, right? And but she put it to very specific music that she knew was gonna, like, kind of the music itself would just get him off.
Your book is very specific.
Yeah, I know. And he, like, she talks about the Danse Macabre. Yeah. And, like, it's basically about, like, a necromancer bringing people back to life.
Oh, that would totally get H.P. Lovecraft.
Right? So she knew that, and she's like, okay, if I play this music while I dance over it, and her dance included her basically coming back to life.
Did she have a coffin and everything? Because that would be cool.
She probably put a lot of money into the theatrics of trying to get H.P. Lovecraft, nice and hard. But, like, she does all this work for him, right? She even takes this weird concept to try and get him aroused, and does it. So I don't think that there was too much, and that on her end that I blame her for. But I haven't read her letters from after he died or after they divorced.
Well, I just also read that, like, HP later described her as domineering and stuff, but that could be him projecting and trying to, kind of gaslight her.
And here's why I think he would have that. Because he has this thing called the Kellums. Did you read about the Kellums at all?
What are the Kellums?
The Kellums is a group of people. It was K, L, and M were the first letters of the surname. So L is Lovecraft. K and M, I don't remember the names of the gentlemen who would hang out with him, but KLM, so they're like, oh, Kellums, and it sounds like Salem's, I guess. I don't know. But that was literally, it was like this gang that Lovecraft created with his friends.
Of like really probably wimpy white dudes.
Exactly. Dudes that could just hang out all night and do all kinds of stuff together, read a lot of books, write and talk, and go look at architecture. This is what Lovecraft loved to do. And these guys did that, right? So Sonia, he marries her. He comes to New York, and he fucking hates New York, by the way, because there are so many diverse people. He
described himself at one point as feeling like an alien. And I was like, really?
Yeah. He's so ridiculous. So he finds a small group of guys, and he starts feeding into this culture to the point where at one point Sonia's health starts to deteriorate because she made a bad investment. They need money, and Lovecraft is supposed to go get a job. But he's bad at it. He doesn't want a job. He doesn't want to work. Harry Houdini himself offered Lovecraft a job, and he was like, no, I don't want to do that. Harry Houdini! Like, what? He wrote a book or a story for Houdini, right? And Houdini loved it so much, he wanted to bring him on, and he's like, no, I don't want to do that. So obviously this is starting to get to Sonia, because she's like, how are we going to make money? My husband doesn't do shit. It starts to affect her health, and she has to go to the hospital. And this book that I'm reading says he visited her every day as long as it didn't get in the way of him hanging out with his boys.
Whoa.
Right? Like, there are times where he was supposed to go there, but he would end up going and getting a drink with the boys, and they'd be out till 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, just stumbling out into the streets and arguing about stuff and talking about, architecture.
Typical dude stuff.
Yeah. So this was kind of, I think, starting to become the final straw for Sonia of like, look, we can't do this anymore, obviously. And then Lovecraft decided he couldn't stand to be in New York anymore, so he moved back to Providence. And I think that if there is a lot of anger from her towards him, that's justified. And I could see how if she's like, hey, stop hanging out with your boys.
I'm in the hospital.
Yeah.
You never visit me.
But then the way Lovecraft makes it sound, she's so domineering. She wants me to go visit her in the hospital.
Guys, I fell for it. I'm sorry. Never mind. I'm team anti-Lovecraft now.
Well, and this is the thing. This is when we get to see really the worst of Lovecraft. Well, I think this period, he's
always kind of been a douche, but
so he moves back to Providence, and I want to try and find it. What year?
Well, it would have been like 1926. 26. They were only married for 2 years.
Right. Yeah. I thought they were married for 3.
Well, maybe 3. Then it was 27.
Right. Yeah, they like he moved back in 26, right? And so at this period we see him really faltering as a husband. He moves back to Providence, and then his racism is just ramped up at this point. He is writing a lot of stuff that is very racist. He's putting it in his stories. A lot of people, I was reading this one article where this teacher, he had everybody read The Call of Cthulhu, and then he asked them to pick one word that represented his his philosophy. He was thinking they were going to come back with nihilistic or non-existentism or something like that. Majority of them wrote racism.
Really?
And he's like, all I had them do was read Call of Cthulhu. We did not discuss him at all.
Wow.
And these students were able to pull that out of Call of Cthulhu. And so, it's a part of his writing, especially at this point, because soon to come is Call of Cthulhu. And, let's see, 147. See if I can find an example. Oh, he ends up taking this one lady's book, which, by the way, I want us to do an episode on this one lady. Her book is called, I can't remember. God of the Witches.
And what's the lady's name?
The lady's name is Margaret Murray. And she has this witch cult thesis that the witch hunts of, Salem and stuff, there was actually like this cult of people that had started like in ancient Egypt and had like came over to New England, and they were getting ready to spread, and that this witch hunt was actually to find them, but it was disguised as a witch hunt. And so that was her theory, and Lovecraft took that and ran with it, saying like that on top of like everybody outside of America are all mongoloids, evil people. Only people from Germany and England are like real people. He would when Sonia wanted to throw a party, he would say that's fine as long as there's more Aryans than there are mixed race people. Right? Like he was to be honest, I would say racism was his theology. It was the way that he believed the world worked. It's where he placed himself compared to everybody else. And so I don't know. Because after the last episode, and I've talked to a few people about it too, like, they're like, yeah, we still think it's more just this. The name of his cat was just a product of time. It's like, no, I cannot believe that. Especially the more I read about him, he was so ardently against blacks and Jews, and like his wife, Sonia Green, was Jewish, and she would have to remind him of that. He'd be like, yeah, I don't want too many Jews there. And she's like, I'm of the Hebrew people, right? Like, what are you talking about? And he would have to back off of that because he didn't know how to respond to the fact that, oh, right.
Oh, whoops.
My wife is Jewish. Yeah. So, yeah, he's super racist at this point. I think this is a defining moment for him, these few years where he is a dick. Just an absolute dick. And we really get to see his personality come out for the first time because his mom is dead, his wife is gone, and now it's just him being him. And he's really figuring out what he actually likes, and it's not women, and it's not other races of people.
Do you think that is reflected in the fact that so many of his protagonists, for lack of a better word, are also huge assholes?
What do you mean? What protagonists are assholes?
Well, like, I'm thinking of one of my favorites is The Temple, which, did you read that one? Mm-hmm. It's the submarine one.
Yeah, with the super German guy.
Yeah, and he's like the main character, and spoiler alert, he ends up killing everybody on his submarine because they want to, get out of their bad situation.
Right,
and
but he's like, no.
And then he basically sentences himself to die too. And I'm like, wow, you're a terrible person.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like a lot of the stories go that way. Like, I don't know, the cave, like, at the end of the story, you find out, plot twist, the dude who was lost in the cave killed another human because it scared him.
Yeah. And then the house, and the picture in the house.
I don't think I read that one.
A guy goes in to get shelter from the storm, and he sees the guy that owns the house has all these art depicting people eating other people from Africa. And then like there's like blood dripping from the ceiling, so he knows that he just killed someone or something like that.
Well, and then in Rats in the Walls, it's the Rats in the Walls, right?
Yeah.
The dude like discovers his family history is that they were all cannibals, and then he eats someone. I'm like, this is a terrible moral.
Yeah.
Like there are no morals in H.P. Lovecraft stories.
Right.
It's basically very cynical, and everything is dark and terrible.
Yeah, I mean that's the point of Lovecraft, is that there is no good. There's no balancing act of good versus evil. There's apathy. There's darkness and nothing. And that is his point. And we get into that, especially now. So after this point, when does it come out? When does Cthulhu come out?
28.
28. Because that's when, he's got... he's got the quest stream in 26. Silver Key is a follow-up to that, and those are stories that follow up with a character from the people are gonna hate me who love the account according to
I think I know.
the statement of Randolph Carter, right? So that's the Quest of Unknown Kadath and Silver Key are follow-ups to that, and what they do is they leave you with this yearning for answers, and they don't answer them. They basically are like, well, that's how the universe works. It doesn't answer things for you. And Call of Cthulhu has a lot of that stuff in it as well, where we don't get all the answers. We get an idea of what's going to happen, and then that's the end of the story. And he moves on to the next story in that book. And then the book ends with him going, I don't want to live anymore. Right?
Yeah. So many of his mythologies that he creates are like that. It's like he's got these seemingly super complex historical societies. Like in the temple, they find what they believe to be Atlantis at the bottom of the ocean. No explanation for that.
Right.
In other ones, it's like these people are, I can't remember which one it is. It's where this one tribe comes in and kills everybody off, and then 1,000 years later or something, they rise from the grave and swarm in and kill them. And none of that history or mythology is ever explained.
Right.
It's just we're all dead now.
This is just what happened.
This whole city was wiped out.
And I think, so that's why I think that Cthulhu is so representative of Lovecraft. It was written right after this period where he had a bad breakup. He lost his mom. He is frustrated with New York, and he's come home. And he's really trying to put a lot of these complex feelings into his writing. And so Call of Cthulhu takes a lot of the themes that he's had, a lot of the writing styles that he's been practicing with, and puts them all into one. And it creates this monster that represents nihilism. The great god Cthulhu is not even a god himself. Cthulhu is just another being under the old gods and under the elder things and all this stuff, and yet in Call of Cthulhu, Cthulhu is somehow the main antagonist. And I mean, honestly, in that book, Cthulhu is kind of a bitch because he gets stopped with a boat.
Yep.
And that's it.
I mean, it was a big boat.
Was it? I thought it was like a yacht.
Well, a yacht's a big boat.
That's true. But
it wasn't like a warship.
Yeah, not like a barge or, something that has some heft to it. It was just like some dude's boat. And so I think that he's working through a lot of his feelings of frustration with life. And he's talked about, people have said they were concerned because they thought he was carrying around a bottle of arsenic just because he might want to end it at some point.
Drink it at some point.
And he didn't know when that was going to be, so he just kept it on him. Right? That's deep. That's depressing. That's bad. But he's working through it in his writing. And I think that that's a big part of the Lovecraft style is he doesn't have answers, and he kind of doesn't want to have answers. And I think that, to me, this is a big thing. The number one problem with people is that they don't change, or they don't want to change, right? Because people do change, but people don't want to change. And when you have a god, when you have something that is calling you to be different, you can either say, no, you don't exist, or you can answer that call and say, okay, I do need to change. And that's a very Christian thing for me to say, right? Because then I go into the Lord Jesus Christ is calling you to change. I'm not going to do that. But for Lovecraft, I think that he made the conscious decision that there is no God, because if there is no God, then I don't have to be a better person. Then all this is just pointless, and then I don't have to be a better husband. I don't have to go get a job. I can lay around and do nothing. I think at this point, when he's writing Call of Cthulhu, he is making that statement of, there is no point, and that's what I have to believe so that I can keep writing my stories. That was my Call of Cthulhu take.
No, it's a deep take.
Yeah? You think people are going to yell at me about it?
they'll be like, no, it was after the Mountains of Madness that he was feeling that.
I think that these are all stories that represent that.
Do you think he ever actually worked through it? Because I don't think he did. I think he kind of stayed miserable forever, and then he died.
But that's what I'm saying is he chose that. He chose that life. He chose to live in a way that there can't be a God.
Yeah.
Because if there is, he has to do more.
He took the easy way out. He's like, I never have to improve myself. I'm just going to be a nihilist forever.
Exactly. Everything's
Which is one thing when you're
like
16 and took your first I don't know, literary class or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a totally different thing when you're 40.
40, yeah, exactly. And that's what he's pushing at this point, is 40 years old. And his relationship with Sonia continued, too. Like, they didn't just hey, we're done. Like, she went on vacation somewhere near Providence at a farmhouse. So she invites him. She's like, "Hey, Lovecraft, hey buddy."
She sent him a text
yeah,
what
you
up?
Yeah, and so he came to this farmhouse and stayed a weekend, and she brought him because there's all this architecture there that she knew that he would love, and I think they were there for 3 nights, and they slept in separate bedrooms. And then on the second night, she kissed him because they had a nice romantic day. She kisses him, and he pushes back, and he's like, I don't think that's good for us anymore. And so she's like, oh, ouch. All right. And then the next day, they just go out, do their thing still. They're still friends. That night, she doesn't try it again because
she's a girl and she's smart.
Yeah, she figures it out finally. And they even continue to correspond and stuff. So there was still a relationship there. I think that it was a matter of Sonia realizing this is who Lovecraft is. He is all in his head, and what he writes is what he is. Right? There's no oh yeah, I write horror, but I'm also a really fun guy. I like to play golf.
I'm on a bowling league.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's not Lovecraft.
Sonia was in some deep need of girlfriends to tell her to dump his ass.
Yeah, well,
and stop trying to get him back.
yeah, that's probably true. She eventually moved to California, and I think they pretty much cut off.
Probably.
I think they kind of corresponded a little bit, but they never saw each other again.
Lovecraft wouldn't have done well in California. Too sunny.
No, absolutely not. And he's like, when does the sun go down? What's that darn thing gonna set? Oh, all right.
Yeah.
This is awkward. Okay, so what's your next point?
Oh, I was just saying that those were kind of the big ones. Call it Cthulhu at the Mountains of Madness, which is that his actual longest work?
I think so.
It was too long for Weird Tales. They rejected it. So it didn't get published until a long time, or it got serialized in 1936. So 5 years after he sent it to Weird Tales.
Right.
It got serialized in Astounding Stories instead.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, with Weird Tales, they did this a lot with his work. Actually, they rejected a shit ton of his work. And then he'd resubmit later with almost no changes, and they'd immediately buy it up. Yeah, it's super weird. They did it all the time. They did it with Call of Cthulhu. They did it with Shadow over Innsmouth. All these books they're some of his best books, and they would always reject it first.
Was it just the editor was changing or something? They had a different person in command, or?
It was definitely the editor who was making the choice to do these things. Yeah. So.
And Lovecraft had some contentious relationships with his editors too. He did not take suggestions well at all.
Oh no, he hated criticism.
I remember there was one where the editor was trying to change all of the spellings to the American style because Lovecraft always tried to spell color with U's and stuff the British way because he thought British people were better than us. Yeah. And the editor tried to make him change it back, and he wrote this long rant of a letter about the editor totally chewing him out. And I'm like, dude.
But the thing is, he was writing for the pleasure of writing and making art. He didn't write to make money.
Yeah, that's obvious.
I think
he was not doing well.
Color Out of Space made $25 total. And so I think he looked at writing as this very, I don't know, he took it very seriously. He didn't think he wrote anything wrong ever. And to the point where he's like, it's not about making money. This is a calling. This is what I do as a person. This is who I am. So, don't criticize my books.
Yeah.
You know?
He's kind of like that stereotypical arrogant creative type. He's like, nope, I can do no wrong.
Okay, so before we start getting into his works, there's one last person I want to talk about.
And who's that?
Robert Barlow.
I don't even know who that is.
You don't know anything about okay.
Do tell.
If H.P. Lovecraft had sex with any man, it was Robert Barlow. 100%.
Your book is so invested in his sex life. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
It's interesting. It's interesting stuff because it's so contentious. Like, you don't know where he stood, and these are relationships that he built with people. Now, a big thing that he would do is he would have like I talked about before, Weird Tales, Astonishing Stories. They would have a following. He would have a following through these magazines, and he would start correspondence with people through those magazines. It's how he met a lot of the women that he had in his life. It's also how he met 98% of the men in his life. And he knew how it looked through their correspondence. He was very open with them. He was very loving towards them and a mentor towards them, to the point where he started kind of distancing himself in certain ways. Like, he would call them my son or my grandson or this or that, like ways to where he's like not a lover, right? And he would refer to himself, especially in correspondence through the editor's column in these magazines, he'd call himself Grandpa Cthulhu, which that's super cool, actually. Right? Yeah. Now I'm gonna do a T-shirt of Grandpa Cthulhu.
Buy the whole line, guys.
Yeah, you can get Lil Lovecraft and Grandpa Cthulhu.
That's actually a sick nickname.
So he would have these conversations with people, and it's one of the reasons why there is such a big debate of did he like women? Because he really liked men. Even if we're not talking sexually, he really just liked the company. He liked being around them. And so when he started talking to Robert Barlow through mail, right? And probably 3 years into their relationship of talking, he decided to take Barlow up on the invite of hanging out down in Florida with him. Shows up. Barlow's 14 or 15 years old. Yeah.
When he couldn't get more controversial.
Right. So Lovecraft only stays for 7 weeks.
Oh my God.
With the Barlow family.
So this kid's parents are there and stuff?
Yeah. Well, the dad was gone. The mom was there, but Barlow's whole family struggled with mental problems. They were kind of on shifty ground a lot of the times. And so he stayed for 7 weeks. And they were inseparable, 100%. And then eventually Lovecraft left, and then Lovecraft came back, I believe. And I might be getting the things wrong, but essentially at one point he stayed for another 10 weeks or something like that throughout the summer and then into August. And Robert Barlow tried to convince him to stay through the winter, to be it's nice here in the winter. It's Florida. It's warm. And they spent H.P. Lovecraft's 44th birthday together, and they were hanging. They were pals. They were dudes, right? And then at one point, Barlow's dad got transferred to Kansas, and Barlow convinced his parents that it'd be better for him to go to Providence without them. So then he lived with Lovecraft for 3 weeks before going to Kansas, I think. And then in that time they spent another birthday together. They would go out at midnight and just, he'd show them all the places around Providence, and they'd talk about horror books, they'd talk about science, they'd talk about history, architecture, all the things that Lovecraft loved. And he had a legit relationship with this guy. A big part of this, and it's not oh, shocking, but a big part of this is that Robert Barlow is gay, and he was kind of open about it. He ended up as being a professor in New Mexico, and he would have sex with his students, And one of his students eventually was like, hey, you need, like, blackmailed him and said, if you don't do whatever he wanted, I'm going to tell everyone that you're gay. And because of this, Robert Barlow killed himself because he didn't want the secret getting out. But it, like, through their correspondence, it was pretty well known that, like, Robert Barlow was in love with Lovecraft. Well,
who wouldn't be? He's such a charming man.
I know, right? But there's so much to his nature that's so interesting. And even if let's say they didn't have sex, which I can believe that they didn't. I don't believe that they didn't, but I could believe that they didn't. Like, it's this relationship that Lovecraft sought that's interesting to me. He liked intellectual relationships. He was a better husband through correspondence with Sonia than he was for the 2 years he lived in New York. And they talked a lot through that, and he liked to be around her because she was intelligent. And same with all the boys through the magazine that he would know, and especially with Robert Barlow. When he found someone who genuinely loved his mind, he would love them back unconditionally. So it was interesting to me that was like, I knew about Robert Barlow, but I didn't know that their relationship was so deep.
Do you think Lovecraft loved him?
Yeah, like I said, I think even if it's not a sexual thing, I think that Lovecraft was in love with people who were intellectual, who he could connect with and conversate with and go through graveyards at midnight with and talk about who's buried here and where did their family come from and look at the architecture of this. He loved people who were willing to
listen to him blab on
but also be a part of that conversation. So yeah, I think that's why I wouldn't say that Lovecraft was homosexual. I wouldn't say he's heterosexual. I don't know if I'd say he's asexual. But there's this sort of weird place where he sits because he's not looking for...
He's just a brain.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So I just wanted to bring that up. So now let's talk about his books.
Okay.
Cha, cha, cha.
So, which ones did you say were your favorite last time?
My favorite is From Beyond.
Really? Okay. Do you want to talk about why?
I guess. I mean, if you're putting me on the spot, I will.
Tyler's on the spot. He has to tell me why it's his favorite.
Now. Say it.
Right now.
I'm trying to look up
He hasn't said it yet. It's not his real favorite. He's not a fan, guys.
When did he write it? From Beyond.
To Infinity. From Beyond.
And From Beyond. No. This is freaking me out because I don't see it in this list, and I'm like, I know he wrote
Maybe
that.
It's not even a Lovecraft story.
That would piss me off.
No, it is. I found it. 1920, but not published until 1934.
1920?
Is when he wrote it.
From Beyond, there it is. Yeah, 1920. 1934, it appeared in Fantasy Fan and then reprinted in Weird Tales in 1938. And
they must have rejected it the first time.
Stuart Gordon, yeah, probably, adapted it for his film of the same name in 1986. I'm going to have to look that up because I've never didn't know
it's
about
probably not good.
Stuart Gordon's a great director, though. He did the Reanimator. I'm like 90% sure he did Reanimator. Okay, so The Reanimator is a story by Lovecraft about a guy who I'm also looking up when he wrote that.
He's looking up 2 books at one time.
I am looking up 2 books at one time. This is what I do. God,
he's got 5 books out right now, guys.
Where are they? It's like only when I'm looking for them that I can't find them too. Herbert West Reanimator was written in 1921. Through 1922 for serial publication Homebrew. Famous as the basis for the 1980s cult horror film of the same name, Lovecraft received $5 for each installment. And so I'm pretty sure Gordon Stewart also is the guy that did that as a movie. And Reanimator's cool. It's basically like a Frankenstein story. A guy has another younger friend who's the narrator, and this is a very common theme throughout Lovecraftian books, where the narrator is the submissive character to the main character or something of that nature. They're very submissive. They do what the other person says, no questions asked. Or if they got questions, the person's going to get mad at them. Sometimes people got straight up roughed up by the other person. They work at a college mortuary or something like that, and then they start bringing people back to life. Or they try to, but everybody is kind of fucked up when they're brought back to life, and eventually they kill Herbert West because he created them.
Seems about right.
Very Frankenstein-y.
Very Frankenstein.
Anyway, From Beyond is about... Oh man,
tangent.
It's a short story. I listened to the whole thing probably in 20 minutes. I read it a long time ago as well, and it's about a guy who comes to his friend's house after probably several weeks of not being there, not hearing from him and not seeing him, because the last time he was there, the narrator told his friend, like, dude, stop trying to do this science experiment because you do not have the temperament to succeed at this science experiment. What you're trying to do is open the mind to other dimensions. And either you're going to fail and you don't handle failure very well. So you're going to just keep failing and then you're going to kill yourself. So stop doing that. Or you're going to succeed and you are not equipped to deal with that. Like, you don't know what's going to happen.
Well, he wasn't wrong.
Right? So the guy kicks him out of his house, right? And then several weeks later, he gets a telegram. He goes over, and the whole house is like empty and dark, and the servants are all gone. Like, nobody's there to open the door for him. And he goes, and the friend shows up, and he's all weird and stuff. And he's like, "Oh, I've done it. And so he takes him down, and the guy's like, "Where's the servants?" He's like, "Oh, they're not here anymore." Right? And you're like, okay, this guy's nuts. And so then he takes him down into this room where he's got this machine, and then he turns the machine on, and immediately the narrator starts seeing the color ultraviolet. And the guy's like, "Yeah, you didn't know you could see ultraviolet, did you? But our bodies have all these different organs that have turned off their senses, but we have all of these senses, and we're examining the different..." And then, like, the guy starts seeing, like, little bugs that are in the air that we breathe. Nope. And he's like, "Oh man, this is fucked up," right? And then that's what the narrator says, almost exactly word for word. No, I'm joking. I'm paraphrasing hard here. And so as the narrator's describing all these things that he's starting to see more and more of, because his senses are opening up more and more, the narrator is like, "I've done it. I have made a machine that opens up our senses to see the things that are beyond our senses, to see the things that we've closed ourselves off to. The thing is, we close ourselves off to these things because we need to survive. And if you can see them, then they can see you." You remember this one now?
I remember this one now, yeah. Yes.
And so then he's like, "I turned on the machine, and unfortunately the servants also caught part of this and saw the things. And then they went to turn on the light or turn off the light or something, and they moved, and the things saw them and killed them immediately. That's why they're not around. And you didn't think I could do it. You told me not to do it. So fuck you. You don't look behind you. There's a monster right there. Just look right there." And then the guy, like, pulls out his gun and shoots the machine. And then the friend, I'm using air quotes now, had a heart attack or something, and the guy's like, "But I still see the monsters everywhere." Dun 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 dun. Like, that's the end of the book.
Yeah.
I love that because I said it in the last episode. It's very Poe-esque in the way that there's this revenge that you don't even understand is happening until, like, the end. But then it's Lovecraftian in the way that there's technology and the beyond and all of that. So and it, it kind of just gets to the point. Like, there's not a lot of playing around with it.
It's a pretty short one.
Yeah.
It ends well.
Sure.
It's punchy.
All of the servants are dead, and the guy tried to kill his friends. Totally ends great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And after, the guy who did the thing is dead, they pin all the murders of the servants on him, even though the bodies were never found.
They were never found. Yeah. Yeah. So how about you? What you said last week that
I had so many favorites. I already mostly talked about the temple. That one's like one of the early submarine adventure stories.
Right.
Which is just further proof that Lovecraft is ahead of his time.
Definitely.
He's so, yeah.
Yeah.
He liked him before they were cool.
Is the temple's the one where he ends up on like the island of a bunch of different roots and things, right?
Nah. He ends up underwater dead. But happy about it.
Right, because they go into the temple in the submarine, right?
The submarine, so after he kills all the crew and stuff, because they're revolting because... So I think they started the curse because they killed all the British people on the life rafts.
Right,
and
of course.
They went down underwater. And when they came back up, there was that dead soldier clinging to the hatch of the submarine.
Yeah.
And they just kind of pushed him off, but first they took a little ivory token off of his body because
right,
they were like,
yeah.
oh, this looks cool and valuable.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha. And then they go back down underwater and weird stuff starts happening and then the crew's like, this isn't great, boss.
Yeah.
But then he's like vicious and whips one of them.
Yeah.
And then the next time they try to revolt, he shoots two of them.
Right.
And I'm just like, guy, this is not going well. And then eventually everyone's dead. The engines have blown on the submarine, so you can't navigate it.
Right.
It can't go back up. So he's basically resigned himself to dying down there. It lands on the ocean floor. He looks out, and there's this temple.
Right.
And he's like, oh, this must be the lost city of Atlantis. So he gets out and explores in one of those dive suits or whatever.
Yeah.
And he finds all these, images of the same token that they stole from the dude.
Right.
So I would presume that's how it's
Where
all
it came
connected.
from.
He's cursed because they stole the thing or whatever.
Right.
So then he gets back into the submarine and it's basically out of air and electricity. So he writes this long manuscript saying what happened and read this and know my story. And then he puts on the dive suit and goes out to die in the temple.
Wow.
Yes. Very true.
Wow.
There needs to be a movie of this.
There needs to be a lot of H.P.
very
Lovecraft
visual.
movies. Yeah, they are. They very much are. I think we're getting The Color Out of Space is also one of my favorites. And we're getting a movie of that one with Nicolas Cage. Oh my god. Yeah.
I was excited for half a second, then I got really
what is this color doing? That's my Nicolas Cage impression.
Oh my gosh. Do you know when that's supposed to come out?
No idea. I think it's gonna probably do Sundance, and then it'll probably come out in theaters or something like that. Color Out of Space is basically a guy's investigating this. What was it? He's investigating somewhere, and nobody will drink the water out of this reservoir.
Cursed water.
It is cursed water. Yes, exactly. Because as he investigates, they find out that this farm had a meteor hit, or not a meteor, but what would be a meteor?
An asteroid or something? Yeah,
Meteor hits this farm, and it starts radiating this weird color that nobody's ever seen before. And then this weird growth starts to grow on everything, and eventually it's this radiation that just ends up mutating everybody on the land. And then the people built a dam, and the water rushed over the top of it, and basically it's now just a stew of this radiation, and it's supposed to be the water for Arkham, which is his fictional city.
Well, I can't wait to see Nicolas Cage hopefully not drink the damn water, but
What's in this water?
What's in this water?
The customers here in the store keep looking at me weird because I keep shouting randomly.
Well, that's what happens when you shout randomly.
Yeah, for sure.
That's how H.P. Lovecraft's dad ended up in an insane asylum.
What's one of your other favorites? Do you have one from later on in his career? Because the Temple's pretty early.
I
right?
don't. That is my main issue. I like all of his early stuff, and most people who I read or listened to think his work got drastically better after New York.
Yeah.
And everything I like was pre/during New York.
Yeah.
So I'm wrong apparently, but the Temple is great. Rats in the Walls is great.
Yeah,
and
I'm looking
the Cats
through...
of Ulthar is my third favorite one.
Right.
Because I love cats and I love a good revenge story. And
that's exactly what that is.
It's great. It's very mythical and it's very short and kind of poetic. And yeah, it's a good revenge story.
Yeah.
Because spoiler alert, the cats eat the couple who went around killing cats.
Yeah, that's a big spoiler.
Eaten to death
way to
by
go.
Cats. Picked clean.
Yeah. That's a good one. You still should.
You still should. It's great.
Under the Pyramids is the book, the story that he wrote for Harry Houdini. As Harry Houdini.
Did Harry Houdini pay him more than $5 for it?
I don't know.
Because somebody should have.
It was ghostwritten, so I'm guessing he got paid for it. I don't know. Cool Air is also a good one. Guy finds out that there's this person who lives in a building who needs to have it cold all the time, and then he finds out it's probably because the dude was dead the whole time, and his body was like could never overheat or else he'd like melt. The music of Eric Zahn kind of follows a little bit of the same theme of like living in a building, and you have a roommate, or not a roommate, but a neighbor who's really weird, and this person is they're making music every night, and it's super fucking weird.
1 second. Megan, can you let Paul in?
They locked him out.
The other owner of the store is currently locked outside. I had to interject for him.
Curse of Yig is super weird.
Are these all later ones?
These are 1924 through 27. So the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. If you like cats, that's a good one because there are singing cats in it.
Oh my god.
I think singing. They're talking at least. And honestly, when I was reading the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, no joke, I believe that they should make a musical based on it.
Like a better creepy version of Cats.
Yeah, the cats aren't like the biggest part of it. There's a lot of stuff. It goes everywhere. It goes from like under like graveyards where there's a whole graveyard world, all the way to the moon, all the way to outside of time and space, and like seas in space that you can sail boats on and things like that. But like it's just so ridiculous that I legit feel like you can convey all the emotion that they convey in all of it through song, and it wouldn't be more ridiculous than the original story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if someone out there is listening, they're trying to figure out, man, how do we turn this into a movie? Do it as a musical because it's ridiculous.
I'm trying to figure out who's that dude who directs Baz Luhrmann. There we go. He needs to direct it.
Who's that?
He's the one who does like Moulin Rouge or whatever.
Got it.
And then I think he did like the new version of Romeo and Juliet, but I might be wrong about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know Moulin Rouge, and I'm done with that. I'm good.
You're done with that?
Until he does the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath.
You won't be watching any more Baz
really
Luhrmann.
Yeah. Pickman's model is really weird and scary and interesting. Also, he makes a in Unknown Kadath. It's a short novel, and it contains a lot of stuff from his other stories, like a lot, like Cats of Ulthar. I think it's the cats from Cats of Ulthar who are on the moon that he's talking to.
I wouldn't put it past those bastards.
Pickman's model is in there as well. So really, really interesting stuff. His later stuff, you get into Dunwich Horror, which I talked about on the last episode with the guy who the grandpa might be the dad for the daughter's children. So that's weird. At the Mountains of Madness is his longest story, and in most people's opinions, probably his best because it's a longer story. The Whisper in Darkness was really scary. Shadow Out of Time. The Thing on the Doorstep is kind of fucked up because that one's probably the closest to him writing about homosexuality. Because it's about a guy who gets married to a chick who's like some creepy, like sorceress type chick who goes to college, so she's really smart and stuff. And that's where he meets her, and then she like has enchanted him, and they've talked about how like it almost feels like she can change bodies with people when she stares at them, and then he learns that she's been changing bodies with her dad, so that they can find a new body. And so whenever he has sex with her, he's essentially having sex with his father-in-law. It's
who's
super
in
weird.
His girlfriend's
in his
body.
daughter. Yeah.
Gross.
So I'm not going to give too much away.
On a scale of 1 to Arthur Germain, how gross is your family?
And then the last big book that he wrote was The Haunter in the Dark. Did you?
I didn't read that one.
It's
big as in like successful or big as in long?
No, big as in successful. And it was almost a not retaliation. There was a book or a story written in Weird Tales where the author wrote it very obviously the main character is Lovecraft. Right? And so all the fans, all the weird people who are into Weird Tales so much that they know this, wrote to the editor in the editor's column saying, Lovecraft, you need to write a response and make him the main character of your book. And so he wrote The Haunter and The Dark.
And so he probably dies some gruesome death.
I'm not going to say. You can go read it. So that was the last one that he really wrote before he died in 1937.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah, that's when he got his diagnosis, and he died the same year.
Yeah.
In Providence, though, so at least he died in the perfect city in America.
Yeah, with all the whites surrounding him.
All the white people.
So that's Lovecraft. And to be honest, there's so much more about him that we didn't cover. I mean, getting into the books would be, I like, it's interesting, but I don't want to give too much away of too many books. Because part of the horror of stories is the twist, right? So there might be stories here and there that we dive into. We'll probably dive into The Call of Cthulhu because that's his most well-known story and just kind of examine that. But we're not going to do that right away. It won't be the next episode. But
no, we'll let him lie for a little bit, like Cthulhu, waiting on the ocean floor.
Yeah. So that's probably, what would you say, 25% of Lovecraft.
25. Yeah.
Yeah.
In general, because Tyler came into this a huge Lovecraft fan. Mm-hmm. I had read literally nothing by him.
That's too bad.
I like it. I prefer his shorter works.
Yeah.
I think he tends to get a bit verbose sometimes.
Yeah.
His descriptions are a little over the top occasionally.
What would you say you connect with when it comes to Lovecraft? Would you say you are a fan of Lovecraft's work?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so what would you say you connect with?
The creativity, the world building kind of, even though he does leave you kind of like wondering what the heck just happened and where these people came from and like what the mythology is.
Yeah.
I think he had a good mind for creating worlds. Mm-hmm. And that's really cool. Mm-hmm. And the twist. I love a good twist. So
sure.
Even if it is sometimes kind of lame or like
it was his mother-in-law.
I'm just like, oh yeah, you got me there.
Yeah.
Didn't see that coming.
So for me, it's difficult because the more I read this, the more I realized how incredibly racist he is. Yeah. Right? And I already knew he was racist, but I didn't realize to what extent. So it was difficult. And I think that there's, to be like, his racism and his works are two completely different aspects. Like I said before, he was what he wrote. Like, there was no bowling league after finishing the story. He didn't do anything else. He was writing. And I think I view it the same way that I view Lewis's Christianity in his books. It is a part of his storytelling. Is it the main part? Is it the only part? No. It's just where he comes at the storytelling process. Mm-hmm. I don't think that you can ever blame someone for jumping at writing the way that they've been taught to jump at something. And Lewis jumped at it from a way of saying, what is God like? How can I describe God better? Or how do I put this argument into a form that's more digestible? Lovecraft wrote of monsters that were beyond comprehension because he didn't want to comprehend them. He was very materialistic and nihilistic. And so he was trying to write these horrors that he himself was dealing with. And he wrote racist stuff because he was racist. But that doesn't mean by reading them and enjoying what he's writing and being changed by them makes you racist. It's about understanding where he's jumping off. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why I really like Lovecraft is because for me, my whole life, like, there's this thing where, like, Christians will constantly tell you, like, oh, you're just being tested by God. He's going to make you're being put through the fire so you can come out stronger in the end, right? And my whole life has been like that. My parents divorced when I was 7. Like, I almost flunked out of high school, and I didn't get a job after college doing what I wanted to do. And, like, all these bad things have happened to me in my life. And it's always people would say, like, oh, God's just preparing you for something great. And I'm like, okay, but, like, when? Like, because this is starting to get annoying. And I feel like that's how Lovecraft was. He constantly was having a battle with something, and like the big one people would say are like once he went through the fire of New York, he came out a better writer. And it's like, he'd been having struggles his whole life. His dad died when he was 3, and grandpa and grandma and mom, and his wife was not what he wanted, and he was probably struggling with his own sexuality, and he didn't like when anybody criticized his writings, and so everything was a fire for him. He was always being made better to be a better writer. And so I think that's why, like, you do see a huge jump in a lot of his writings, because he's constantly being made better, and he has to approach things differently. And so I think that's why I identify with his works a lot, because he has struggled, and
he's upfront about that.
Mm-hmm, what he is writing is about a struggle with madness, with life, and love. And so I think that's why I like his stuff the most. Not like more than other people, but what I most like about his stuff.
Most like about his stuff.
Yeah. So
I respect that.
Cool. I'm glad you respect that.
Mad respect, bro.
So now we need to say goodbye to people.
We do. But first, we have to tell them some very important information.
Yes, we do.
Which I'm opening on my computer right now because last time I didn't do a good job.
That's too bad. Teaser for next episode, we're going to talk about someone I don't know anything about.
Yes, and that I do, and I have read everything, and I've seen all the TV and movie adaptations, and I will be so knowledgeable,
and
guys.
You're going to talk for 89%.
Yes.
And I will just be here like,
Yep. That's because we're going to talk about one of, I would say, the preeminent mystery writers of the last decade or so. She kind of exploded onto the scene. She's had mad success with everything that comes from her dainty little wrist while she's writing, presumably with a pen or a quill. Who knows? Gillian Flynn.
There we go. Boom.
Boom.
Gillian Flynn. I legit have never read anything. I've never seen any movies. I know Gillian Flynn is a person.
Yep.
And I didn't know if it was Gillian Flynn or Gillian Flynn. So that's how much I don't know about her.
Yep. So Tyler just showing his ignorance of pop culture right there.
Yep. I know that Ben Affleck was in a movie.
Is in a movie, and the book was better.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
You want to talk about where people can find us, or should I talk about that?
I can talk about that because I struggled last time. But you can find us at our website, which is lewislovecraft.com.
Yeah, where we're going to put some pictures up now.
We're going to put some pictures up now because we have them.
Yeah.
If you have thoughts, ideas, pitches for future episodes, you can email them to us at lewisandlovecraft@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
You should also follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Are we going to do a Twitter? Should I even say this?
We'll do Twitter. I don't do Twitter much, I do Instagram and Facebook.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, not Twitter.
Yeah.
Not right now, at least.
Twitter's lame.
You can talk to us on Facebook. You can talk to us on Instagram.
You can like our stuff.
Yeah. So follow us on Instagram.
On those two, yes.
Facebook.
And,
Facebook is facebook.com/Lewis Lovecraft.
Oh, I'm glad you know that because I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've had to send a link to like 100 people in the last week. So
nice.
Just because I'm sharing, I put up the video that has our little cover.
The video is really good. You should go check it out if you haven't already seen it because this is being released and not today.
Yeah. I want to thank Jake Basson for the awesome intro music that we have. Jake, you are awesome. If you guys want to check out more of Jake's music and maybe collab with him or ask him to make music for you, you can find him at soundcloud.com/Jacob Basson. That's GAKEBASSEN.
He said G, but he meant J.
Did I say G? Oh, man.
I was like, wow, that's some interesting spelling.
I meant J.
J.
Yeah, Jake Basson.
Jake Basson. Super talented. We went to high school together. Hey, Jake.
How can people help us out?
The best way is to subscribe and rate and review us online.
Yeah, that's not the best
iTunes.
way, but that's one way.
Is the best way to send us cash.
Definitely the best way. Subscribing, rating, and reviewing are all great ways.
Tell a friend.
That's the best way. Seriously, you guys have no idea We're not going to be buying ads for the show. We're not going to be trying to do a billboard, although that would be fun. We did take a bunch of fun pictures. No, the best way that you guys can help us is by telling a friend. If you don't want to do that, subscribing tells us how many people are listening at any given time. Rating and reviewing will help. iTunes put us in front of other people who might be interested in us. So definitely, those are 3 ways. Take a total of 15 minutes out of your day?
Not even.
We just talked for an hour and a half almost. If you could just take 10 minutes.
10 minutes. That's enough time for a quality review and an email to your grandmother about how good we are.
And don't forget to write to Grandpa Cthulhu. And make sure you tell him how old you are before you invite him to your house for 7 weeks.
That's very important.
It is very important.
Life tips.